What a morning.
It feels like a weird mix between a buck 30
Yeah.
because of the light
Then we've changed the lighting just a little bit. Yeah.
and a podcast episode.
yeah.
So
It's like a little mix of both, which is, I think, a good thing because considering today it's a special episode, not because we're one day late. This is actually planned out, but we're actually having a really big week here at Growblocks. A couple really big announcements. I guess first and foremost, we're actually launching a product.
We are launching a beta product.
A beta product.
Let's be a bit more modest here.
Yeah.
Yes. That's one thing we're doing
That's
this
one
week.
thing we're doing. And also we have a big announcement as far as money goes. We got new funding.
Yes, we're getting 6 million euros of funding led by Project A Ventures and follow on by existing investors as well. And all of that good news.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so if we sound just a little bit tired, like we're not getting enough sleep lately, I think it's been a big week just to kind of get all this prep, but I think it's an exciting time around here. So with all that said, we figured with this announcement, with the beta launch, we wanted to do a little bit of a special episode where we didn't want to do a big sales pitch about what Growblocks is and whatnot, whatever. You'll get that in other avenues here and there. But I think today we really wanted to talk about our story, why we're doing this, kind of how we think, and then maybe a little bit goes into about with how we're thinking in our background about, and maybe that kind of explains what the product actually kind of is.
And I think to the degree we kind of got this question a few times. Hey, what's the story? How did this all come together? You and Olaf and Andrew, how did you end up doing Growblocks? And we were always pushing a little bit off, and we're like, hey, this is maybe not so super interesting. Let's not waste a podcast episode on it. But we felt, in this more special circumstances here, we felt that maybe it's a good time. It's a good time to revisit history a little bit and talk about it.
Definitely. So let's get started from the very beginning. How did this whole thing start?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to go to like this was the day off or something like that. But I think really, if you think through the core belief that powers Growblocks to a large degree is that we do believe that revenue is a science and not an art, right? Kind of, we do believe that growing your revenue can be done and should be done by applying and using data-driven and scientific methods, period, right? And I think this is something that sets us apart as a company, but really the realization when that started is actually something that's, I don't know, I think eight years or so ago. So Olaf and I, we were, I think, sales operations manager was my title, and his title was something, I don't know, biz dev, something below that, let's just say that. And, we talked about some of these stories before here, but I think one realization that we really had was that all of this, putting a sales rep on a pedestal and clapping when they hit a target or when the quota's being reached, or all of that stuff is kind of a little bit phony. We didn't want to take the applause away or something like that. It's not about celebrating folks. It's more about, okay, who's really at the core of actually achieving this, right? And we basically kind of realized that that the adulation of the AE was not the right thing, and all the topics around trying to manage them and commission plans and building your financial planning based on how many E's you can hire and so forth, all of that was kind of false thinking. And in reality, it had to do with the top funnel, how many opportunities you're creating, how many leads you're getting in, and when you kind of drilled into some of the AEs that were super successful, you either saw that they received a lot of opportunities, or they received a lot of inbounds instead, and all of that stuff basically kind of taught us, hey, wait a minute, it's not the magic of that person taking something out of thin air and creating money out of it. It's actually a production line, if you will. They have a very important role to play, but there's lots of other things around it, right? And kind of that realization, I think, was something that hit us fairly long ago. And at the time when we had it was not like, oh, now we're going to go out and change the world. It was I feel this is the inception point of what we're doing here.
Definitely. And I think it's really neat to talk about kind of the logic behind that kind of flow. I think we've talked about that similar logic in other episodes. But what did you end up taking away with those insights? What did that lead to?
Yeah. So, and I think in the beginning, we basically started creating those QBRs and MBRs, and those were then really great conversations because we then could talk about why things happened like they happened, right? It wasn't, hey, Chris had a bad day and therefore we missed target. Let's just say Chris was an account executive in that sense. But it really was way more, hey, the leads were down, or the lead quality went in this direction. Why did it go in that direction? Well, we actually kind of looked into this, and there's fewer hand raisers versus the other ones, and that's why it's kind of pulling down. We probably need to separate this going forward. So we basically got really good at analyzing after the fact what went wrong, by applying those methods, right? Data-driven. And I think sometimes, calling it scientific is a little bit kind of reaching a little bit too high in that sense. But generally speaking, kind of applying logic and data to our funnel, right? That was kind of the starting point to it. And I think where some of that started to change from only looking back to potentially looking into the future was when someone, and it's actually was our CEO back then, and it's one of the biggest investors in Growblocks actually right now. He basically said, okay, guys, so now you have been telling me a couple of times about this, during those QBRs, about those opportunities and that they're closing at, 10, 15%, and it takes 45 days or whatever. And we had one day where we, at that point, opened 10 or something opportunities in the day. With a Slack channel, it came through, we hit 10. And then Ulrich was reaching out and said, like, okay, so does it mean that one of those is going to close in 45 days? And we were like, well, first of all, no, because, we can't guarantee that it's one of those. And, we can't guarantee that it's in 45 days. But yeah, actually, you're right. Your point in a larger context is right. If you were talking about 100 opportunities, yeah, 10 of them will probably close in, 45 days plus minus, right? And that's where for us it made a little bit click that approach, that this is a logic that you can then not only use to explain stuff, but even to use to try and explain future stuff that hasn't happened yet, so to speak. That was kind of a click moment for us, where we were like, okay, wow, actually we can use this now to do things today that, will make, our life in the future a little bit easier.
Definitely. And so a lot of it kind of stems back to, you need to have statistically enough coming in to really kind of judge that. So would you say kind of that was the first creation of the model?
Well, I think so this is a good question. I think on the model side, we didn't have that for a pretty long time in the beginning. We basically said, hey, in order to hit next quarter, we need to have so many opportunities and so forth. Or we knew, we're lagging behind on opportunities, and now there's a forecast on the revenue side, sure, but then we could say, because we aren't producing as many opportunities as we wanted to, probably not going to hit that forecast, right? That was kind of the level of conversation that we had. I think where some of that changed for us was when we went through kind of a significant crisis with the company. We had to kind of rebuild the revenue engine almost from scratch. I talked about this in another episode here before, I think, kind of hitting 12 quarters in a row, something like that. Basically kind of thinking through the whole thing and understanding what was going on, we realized we couldn't, first of all, we couldn't solve it in our heads anymore. And number two, also the whiteboard wasn't enough anymore.
Yeah.
So we started building a model in a spreadsheet, obviously, right? Because that's how you kind of do these things in the beginning. And really the reason for us was, okay, there's a bunch of change. We need to rejiggle the whole revenue engine. We need to move costs and people and all of that around. And how is that gonna fall together in the end again? And in order to gain confidence in that decision, because the logic was there, right? Kind of, we wanted to increase the SDR team. We wanted to take that money away from marketing in order to achieve that. We understood that we actually didn't need so many account executives, so we could then reduce that team and then actually take that money, put it again back into opportunity generation. but now we had more opportunities, and actually we needed more ease again, and then it started to become like it became a little bit more complex, and that's where we then felt like, okay, we probably need a something more intelligent than a slide deck. Basically, that was
Yeah.
the very start, by the way, to help us navigate that, right? And that then became I guess the first, we called it revenue model.
The first revenue model on a spreadsheet, which is a bit of a dirty word around here, but I
Yeah.
mean, it had to have a first meeting somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So with spreadsheets, again, it does feel a little bit against the grain for what RevOps kind of believes in, right?
No, absolutely. And to be honest, I think I I do have a little bit of a finance past, an FP&A past that I usually don't want to talk about that much, which basically means that sometimes so I feel okay in an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Mhm.
That was actually never the problem. I think I think what really kind of transpired when starting to work through the spreadsheet, and you know, I think lots of people know all the kind of little issues with spreadsheets, but the first thing for us was actually to figure out the model itself, right? How is that thing actually going to work together? I think we talked about this also here on the show. I forgot kind of the name of the episode, but basically kind of building out the first crude version of that model, right? And you kind of encounter a couple of funny things like what conversion rate calculation should you be using, and how do you model your sales cycles? Should it just be 45 days or 2 months or 3 months, or how do you kind of do this? And what we actually had to do is we had to go back, use some old data, try to model based on that data to then predict a little bit still past data, but more recent data, in order then to kind of get to a conclusion where we're like, hey, the model is actually starting to be really nicely predictive of the next quarter. And to be honest, it took us quite some time to kind of get this right. There was no one out there that explained how that would actually need to work. And also it's a little bit of a reinventing the wheel we found, right? Obviously, eventually we saw, hey, other people had similar ideas and came to similar conclusions, but basically kind of creating that from scratch. And then when you have a fresh model like this, basing a lot of big decisions on it, it felt a bit scary in the end, to be honest. But after 2 or 3 quarters, we basically kind of figured out how the whole thing really worked, and got increasingly so better at using it, and then stronger and stronger kind of going forward, right? But it was not wasn't an easy birth, if you will, right?
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're considering building out an entire model like this on a spreadsheet. Now you also have to think about access, making sure everyone has that, making sure you're updating it. And then after that, you're also thinking about, well, how do you get as granular as possible? Because eventually a spreadsheet will fail, right?
No, so I mean, so the access side is actually pretty interesting. So obviously, I mean, yes, we had some salaries in there, but it wasn't, it's SDR and E salaries. It wasn't crazy confidential. So it's not like we gave access to everyone, but everyone on the management team who wanted access got that. But that was not the problem. The access management wasn't the problem. The problem was that accessibility was the problem, right? Which basically means you have a couple of people in your organization that are literate in Excel or spreadsheets and so forth, and kind of understand this whole formula thing and understand where stuff is actually coming from. But in the end, if you really wanna have something to bring all the brains in your go-to-market engine around the table into this model and really contribute, it's gonna be it was pretty difficult for us, because obviously and I love my executive team that was kind of working around me and doing really the all the hard work. I couldn't get VP sales or VP marketing or VP CS into the spreadsheet and have them immerse themselves in it. That was just not a thing. They were like, hey, it's a lot of numbers in here. It's really cool, Tony. Just how many opportunities do I need to hit?
Yeah. Just tell me what I need to know so I can get
tell me
away.
that, right? So basically, there was a lot of arbitrage that needed to happen on my side, on the revenue operations side. And we are completely missing out on these guys' inside and these ladies' inside, right? So that was pretty shitty. And then obviously you have this, and I think you mentioned it just before, you have this typical granularity. We call it granularity now, but it's really level of detail that you can go into with an Excel spreadsheet, right? It's two-dimensional, and that's your constraint. And to be honest, I didn't really feel it that much when we were at Falcon. Falcon was really nicely straightforward. We had 3 or 4 different regions that were different. And in each of these different regions, we had inbound and outbound. That was it. That was the model. And that worked out fantastically. And it scaled really nicely, right? So we basically had everywhere we were attacking the same segment. Everywhere we kind of had the same inbound mix and so forth. So all of that was pretty great. But when I then moved on to Plan Day, another team here in Copenhagen, the engine was a little bit more complex than that, actually. The engine really was not only very much more diverse on the inbound side, but the inbound mix was completely different per market that they were operating in. And then on top of that, they also basically both had super SMB and had a mid-market motion. Now kind of I realized, okay, I'm talking 3 different dimensions here now. And I, don't want to do the math here, but it was pretty sizable. And then the problem is that you end up with a lot of zeros or no data in some of those things, which that didn't work. So I ended up building 2 models at the same time. One that was taking inbound, so the channels and the regions into account. And the other one was taking the segments and the regions to account. And I was like, in my theoretical world, I was like, hey, that should kind of work out, right? It never worked out. So those 2 things never were really kind of helping me. And then in the end, I had to kind of choose one, and that didn't kind of tell me the whole truth. And that really was, I kind of realized that theoretically this stuff should actually kind of work out. But it just couldn't get it to where it needs to be on the spreadsheet side.
So with that said, and some of the complexities that the spreadsheet eventually will kind of face, why did you stick with spreadsheets? Why didn't you go with some other software tool? I mean, BI exists, for example.
No, I mean, we had pretty awesome. So the way we structured it in Falcon is we had a BI team in revenue operations. Both of the BI guys that we had at Falcon now work here in Growblocks as well, by the way. It feels like a very small family sometimes. And basically kind of that was the first idea, actually. Sure, it's prove it out in spreadsheet, and then let's push it into BI and try and figure it out there. We never really actually succeeded in fully doing it. So there are a couple of things that I now know, just simple blockers for that stuff, right? One thing, when you do, so BI is really great at documenting the past up until today. They're like really, really great at that. But even if you want to do trend lines, it gets already a little bit. And by the way, we had a fantastic setup. We had Looker, we had 5Trend, we had, the whole thing. And that was in, I think, 2016, 2017. So Looker was still not a big company back then. So kind of we were betting on them. So all of that was pretty great. But, even trend lines was difficult actually to kind of figure out sometimes. And then on top of that, trend lines is one thing, but you really want to have targets. So where did we then, have all of those targets? Well, we had to write them into a spreadsheet to then use as a source through 5Trend to kind of ingest that then to Looker, and then Looker then could display it. But the problem was that those targets basically kind of again lived in a spreadsheet. They were just a bunch of numbers in a column, and they were basically kind of hard coded to a degree there. And then the real issue that didn't necessarily kill it for me, but made it a little bit less useful was, sometimes you could see your opportunities were veering off, and you had a target line and you had a trend line, and the trend line was starting to show a bigger and bigger gap between those 2 things, right? And it was like, okay, cool. Now we know something is off. Let's take action to fix it. Um, what BI just couldn't do was to say, okay, now let me inform the revenue trend line, that there aren't enough opportunities coming in. So the trend line actually needs to kind of start going down a little bit. But that revenue trend line was still perfectly on track. Was like, hey, everything is going great. We're closing business. Nothing to worry about, Tony. No alarm bells ringing whatsoever. And basically, it took then 2 or 3 months until those opportunities that didn't happen today then resulted in revenue that didn't happen then, right? And it's like, we were good and we kind of saw the opportunities filling already, but that logical link between those two things just wasn't there, right? And obviously, so this is kind of one of those examples, but it's basically kind of goes across the board, kind of, hey, we had an AE leave, and then so what does that mean now? Do we have enough or too much quota? Or where do we have that problem? Or should we hire 2 or 3 instead? And it was really difficult to try and build this and squeeze this into a BI setup.
And so, what about on the planning tools side? How did BI and other things that you're working with? How did that kind of work?
So I mean, we explored the BI piece like in depth, and we built some pieces of it. And it's great to have, sometimes people call it revenue BI and have it there and make sure that it kind of works out. We then explored some of the planning tools around, and back then it was like an ANA plan and adaptive planning and stuff like that. And first of all, it was really difficult to get a call with them because we were called commercial operations. And they were like, hey, we only talk to CFOs, I'm sorry. So there was a little bit of that thing that was a little bit difficult to kind of get right. And then it took some coaxing to obviously have this call where you're being qualified, whether or not you're okay to have another call with them. And then you have another demo. And then only afterwards they bring in the solution engineer that actually knows how this thing works. Because the AE was like, we can do this and there's no problem. And then we had the conversation with the solution engineer, and we were basically like, I had a couple of things back and forth, and some of that worked out. And I then basically kind of at some point asked, okay, so our average sales cycle is 45 days, but it's really a distribution. Some of these deals close 10 days, some of those deals close 90 days, but the fat middle is really is around 45. So how do you kind of build this into your planning tool? And the answer was, 45 you said? We just kind of converted in the second month. That's how we're going to approach it. And I was like, okay, I get that, maybe that's kind of the simplified version here, but it's just not right. And it's also, once you overlay this with a couple of different things, it's starting to be fundamentally not right and fundamentally off, right? So for me, it was basically there were a couple of other things, and they're also pretty expensive and yada yada. But this was one of those things where it just broke for me, and I was like, okay, I don't think this planning tool approach is maybe the right one here.
Definitely. So now that you recognize that that planning approach didn't actually work, is that how you kind of started combining things into Growblocks?
Well, really, no.
Okay, easy question.
Yeah. No, it's, this was, again, right, this was 4, 5, 6 years ago. I've been jumping in the timeline here a little bit to kind of give some examples. But no, we were, we didn't have the, let's build a company hat on. We weren't thinking about this at all. We were pretty busy trying to make the companies work that we were part of. We're pretty busy, trying to get our next promotion, and let's go to C-level, and let's kind of get this exit done, and let's kind of find the next follow-on gig and so forth. We were kind of pretty busy with that, I think, and that's why it's so funny once you kind of talk through it and you actually realize all the little things that happened in the past. It took us until I think late 2020, early 2021 to realize that first of all, let's do something together. So this was really initially was Olafur and myself. I was currently at that point was working for Plan Day, and we were working on the exit to zero. So kind of that was starting to become pretty clear to me. Pretty clear in the sense of that I would be leaving that organization because I joined them because of the Falcon exit, and I don't want to be part of that post exit kind of world. And Olafur and Templify had kind of a similar thing going on, not really an exit, but more of a shift to the US. And he was like, as COO, you need to be, at the center of gravity, which was clearly going to be New York. And he just didn't want to, not for that opportunity, go there, right? So we both had kind of an off ramp that was starting to become clear to us. And then we basically had, we had a couple of lunches every week and so forth. And we were basically kind of, hey, this is kind of a stars aligning moment. So it would be stupid not to take it. Yeah. So that was the start, really. But at that point, we were really far from, and it's going to be revenue planning execution, and the name's going to be Growblocks, and it's going to be like this, and it's going to be like that. This was really far away from that. We basically just had the motivation saying like, hey, we will regret if we don't do it ever. When better than now, because it's very rare that both of those careers kind of come to a little bit of a natural break at the same time. And then we were throwing around a bunch of different ideas we had. We wanted to do something in the rental consumer space. We wanted to do something, in the GDPR and compliance space.
Oh, riveting.
Yeah, I know. By the way, this was the reason why we stopped this compliance thing. We were basically kind of asking ourselves, okay, for the next 10 years, do we want to talk about compliance? And we basically immediately said no, and that killed the idea. It probably would have been a great company, by the way, but not for us in that sense. But this whole the approach to revenue and the approach to planning and kind of marrying those two things, and really that pain that we had as CROs and COOs of those companies was always one slide deck.
Yeah.
We worked on a couple of different slide decks to kind of work through this idea. We spent a lot of time in Olafur's living room with a whiteboard. By the way, the whiteboard was the first official employee of this organization, just to be very clear. And we kind of, threw around some ideas and had some wine and all of that. And then we kind of started pitching some of those ideas to Ulrich, who then also became an investor. And, he was both of our boss in Falcon. And when we presented this, I'm not even sure what we kind of called it, revenue engineering or something like that. I think we kind of called it. When we kind of presented this idea, he was just laughing out loud and basically said like, "Well, guys, I mean, this couldn't be more bang on to the two of you," which basically was a compliment to a degree, right? Because it's having this founder problem fit, that's like a really, really important thing. And I think we very much nailed it in that sense, right? And we more and more discarded some of the other stuff, and then was basically, hey, that's the thing we're gunning for, and that's the thing we're kind of now executing.
Okay. And before we start kind of wrapping up, I guess I want to just have a quick recap, because I think most of this episode is talking about, yes, the formation of this company and whatnot, but a big portion of it is talking about how we kind of see revenue, right? You began this whole episode talking about revenue is a science, not an art, and there is a lot of logic to this whole funnel. And not only I think we're building a lot of people that believe it that you personally pay on the payroll, but I think we're seeing a lot of that within the RevOps community as well.
No, absolutely. And I think it's pretty exciting to have this worldview that's a little bit not shared by everyone. That's kind of maybe a little bit of a difficult thing sometimes, but it's also an exciting thing. And I think some of that newness, which is exciting, also sometimes results in no one else has built something about it or around it, which kind of we're changing and so forth. And I think it's really exciting time to kind of go through all of that stuff. And it's, in connection to that, is also wonderful to pick up 6 million, to really make sure that we get through this process. And basically, by the way, this 6 million is, I think, almost exclusively dedicated to product.
Yeah. We're not getting a new marketing budget, I'll tell you that much.
We're not going to get a new, We can't afford another microphone. So it's basically, we believe in building an absolutely fantastic product that people fall in love with. Once that is done, we can think a little bit more about the go-to-market and kind of spending some more dollars there. But until then, it's basically, very efficient CAC payback. Let's just say it like that.
Yes. So if you're listening to this right now, our beta is released now as we speak. If you want to know a little bit more, we do have a demo video available as well on our website, on our YouTube and whatnot. So you can actually see the product in action.
Yeah.
Have a take a look at it there.
And apologies for the little bit like commercial feel of the episode here, but really it's that has been the story, right? And it's kind of,
Yeah, definitely. And I think everyone that's been listening to at least as many episodes as possible here, I think bits and pieces of the story have kind of been around. And I think it was really important to kind of bring out the fact that like there's a reason we are making this product. It's not just because we saw a gap in the market. It's because we actually see an actual need that people aren't addressing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Toni, for this special episode.
Thanks a bunch, Bart, and have a good time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you too. All right. See you guys.
Bye.